New Mexico Territory, 1883. A widow on a hardscrabble ranch had three choices when her husband died: sell the land, find another man fast, or work herself into the ground trying to hold what was hers. Most chose one of the first two. The ones who chose the third, you didn't hear about them much, because the frontier wasn't in the habit of writing down what happened to women who tried to outlast it alone. I rode onto that woman's land with 42 cents in my coat pocket and a horse going lame on her left foreleg. I wasn't looking for anything but a winter's wages and a dry place to sleep. I found something else. I was 3 weeks on that property when I saw her drag a dead 800-pound steer out of a mud ditch by herself, raining cold and sideways. She had both hands wrapped in the animal's foreleg rope, boots sunk to the ankle in black mud, jaw set like a woman who had made a private agreement with the ground beneath her feet. Her breath came out in white bursts. Her hair had come loose across her face, and she didn't stop to fix it. She just kept pulling. I stood at the fence line and watched longer than a decent man had any right to. I hadn't been looking for anything like that. A man rarely is. The singe had rubbed the raw patch behind Delia's left shoulder by the time I hit the Cimarron Ridge Road. I stepped down and walked her the last 2 miles. The ranch was modest. One main structure, sod foundation, plank walls, a stovepipe that needed straightening, chicken house to the east, a barn that had been built right, which told me something about whoever built it. The fence line along the north pasture was sagging in 2 places, and the gatepost had heaved up from the freeze. 3 months of work for one man, maybe 2. 4 months if the man was honest about it. She came to the door before I knocked. She was taller than I expected, angular in the way frontier women get after years of real labor, no softness wasted anywhere. She had dark hair pulled back and pinned, a work apron over a heavy wool dress, and eyes that gave nothing away on first look. She looked at my horse first, then at me. I told her I was looking for winter work, fencing, hauling, whatever needed doing. She said, "You eat much?" I said I ate enough. She looked at Delia again. Horse needs rest before she works. I said I knew that. Barn's open. Don't touch the roan in the second stall. That was the whole conversation. She went back inside. I put Delia in the barn and rubbed her down with a flour sack I found on a nail. The roan in the second stall was a big animal, well-muscled, with a scar across his nose. He watched me with one dark eye and didn't move. I didn't touch him. There was a wool blanket folded on a hay bale near the door. Left there deliberate, I figured, not forgotten. I laid out my bedroll near the barn entrance, saddle for a pillow, and set my hat on top of my boots the way I always did. The cold came in under the door in a slow, steady way that told me this winter was going to mean business. The supper she left on the porch step was salt pork, cornbread, and black coffee. The pork was close to turning. I ate it anyway. I noticed her portion on the second plate was smaller than mine by half. I stared at that smaller plate for a while. Then I took my cup and went back to the barn. I pulled the cinch tight on the gray mare until she grunted and squared her feet. Then I led her out into the frozen mud of the yard and got to work on the north fence. 2 weeks in, I had the shape of things figured out. She ran the property on a margin so thin a man could see light through it. 3 head of cattle, a milk cow, those chickens, the roan. Wood supply was 3 weeks behind where it needed to be for December. The east section of fence had been repaired with whatever came to hand: rusted wire, smooth wire, a length of what looked like old harness leather. She'd done it herself. It wasn't pretty, but it held. She was faster with an axe than me by a clean margin, and she'd been doing it longer, and she knew it. The morning I found that out, I was splitting the big pine rounds near the woodpile, and she walked past me, picked up the maul without a word, and split a knotted round in 2 strokes that I'd been working at for 5 minutes. Then she set the maul back down and kept walking. I didn't say anything. There was nothing useful to say. Later that week, I repaired a section of hinge on the barn door, set it wrong, used the wrong gauge nail for the timber, and the whole assembly pulled loose the first hard wind. She found it, reset it herself, and didn't say a word about it. Just pointed at the door when I came to get a tool. I looked. I understood. I nodded. She nodded back. She'd learned to take up less space around a man. I didn't know when that had started for her. I didn't ask. It was a pair of men's boots on the porch. Big, worn through at the left toe, the leather dried and cracked from sitting in weather. Nobody had moved them in a long time. I didn't ask. But I came back from the far pasture one afternoon and saw her standing on the porch, looking at those boots. Just standing there, not touching them, her arms at her sides. After a while, she went back inside. I went to the water trough and drank from my cupped hands and stayed out there a good while. The alkaline dust at the north ridge turned to sleet without warning, and by the time I got the stock into the barn, the temperature had dropped 15 degrees and kept going. The storm came in hard. Not the worst I'd seen, but hard enough. Ice pellets driving sideways, the wind finding every gap in the barn siding. I got the animals settled and made my way to the house. She had the door open before I reached the step. "Wood's low," she said. "I'll bring in what's split," I said. "Already did." "Come in out of it." That was the first time I'd been inside the house. It was small and plain and very clean. A table, 2 chairs, a cook stove, a shelf with a few tins, and a Bible with a cracked spine. A mirror on the wall above the washstand, turned face in toward the plaster. A braided rug on the floor that had been repaired in 4 places with different colored yarn. One window facing south, shuttered against the storm. She heated water and told me to see to my hands. I cut the left one on the fence wire 2 days before and hadn't done much about it. She brought out a piece of clean cloth and sat down across from me. She didn't ask to take my hand. She just held out her own, palm up, and waited. I put my hand in hers. Her fingers were cold. She worked carefully, unwinding the dirty cloth, her head bent, the lamp throwing yellow light across her face. I looked at the wall. I could hear the storm at the shutters. I could hear the fire. And under both of those, her breathing. The space between us was not large. At some point, her hands paused for just a moment, not trembling, just paused, and then continued. "Hector used to say I was slow," she said. She wasn't looking up. "With everything. That I took too long with everything." She tied off the cloth and sat back. I didn't answer her. We spent 2 days in that house while the storm ran itself out. She mended. I oiled the leather on my bridle, worked the stiffness out of the buckles. We ate at the same table. We didn't talk much. The lamp burned down to nothing the first night, and she lit a tallow stub she'd been saving, and we sat by the light of that until it was time to sleep. She took the bedroom. I took the floor near the stove with my bedroll. Before I settled in, I looked at that mirror on the wall, turned face in against the plaster. Old habit or old instruction, I couldn't tell. I thought about it for a while, lying in the dark, listening to the wind. My boot caught on the frozen lip of the drainage rut and I went in to the knee before I caught myself on the fence post. The steer had broken through the ice at the far end of the north pasture and gone in up to his belly. By the time we got there, he'd stopped fighting it, which was the most dangerous sign of all. An animal that stops fighting the cold has already started making its peace with it. She was already in the rut to her boot tops before I got the rope rigged. We worked without talking, which was the only way to work when the job was clear and the cold was serious. She took the head, I took the rope around the hindquarters, and we pulled. On the third pull, I lost my footing on the ice-slicked shale and went in. Not far, not deep, but deep enough that the water hit my midsection like a fist, and I went sideways. I got a hand on the bank, but the bank gave way. She grabbed my coat collar with both hands and pulled. She got me out. I stood in the ice water dripping, the cold going mean and deep in my bones. And she was standing 2 feet in front of me, with her chest heaving from the effort, her cheeks red from cold and exertion, her hair half down across her face. The rut was still between us, narrow enough that I could have stepped across it in one stride. She didn't look away. Neither did I. Her breath came out white between us. Mine did too. Neither of us moved. Then she reached up and pushed the hair out of her face and looked back at the steer. "He's still down," she said. "I know," I said. We worked another 20 minutes and got the animal out. He stood up on his own, which was a good sign. We drove him back toward the barn, slow, letting him find his legs. Walking back, I said, and I said it to the ground in front of my boots, not to her face, because that was the only way I could say it. "Leave it." She looked at me. I gestured at her hair, still loose from the effort. "Looks fine," I said. "Leave it." She didn't answer, but she didn't put it back up either. That evening, before she lit the lamp, I crossed to the wall above the washstand and turned the mirror around. She came in from the back room and saw it and stopped walking. I didn't look at her. I sat back down and picked up the bridle I'd been working on and kept working. She stood there for a moment. Then she walked past the mirror to the stove, and I didn't watch her, but I heard her steps, and they were slower going past that mirror than they needed to be. I boiled a handful of chicory root in a dented tin on the stove and poured 2 cups and left one on the table for her. It had been 3 weeks since the storm. We had a rhythm now, not comfortable exactly, but settled. She knew which tools I'd put back where, and I knew she took her coffee with nothing in it, and that she checked the south pasture gate every morning before anything else. A habit so old she probably didn't know she still did it. There were things I knew about her that she hadn't told me. I knew she'd lost children. There was a small wooden cross visible through the south window, just at the edge of the property, in the place where a person puts something they need to see, but can't bear to look at directly. I knew she'd been lonely long before Hector died, because of the way she still startled a little when I spoke to her directly, like she'd stopped expecting to be spoken to. That evening, she was at the shelf above the stove, reaching for the heavy wool blanket she kept folded up there for cold nights. I was on the floor beside the stove, working the axle wheel of the hay cart. The iron ring had gone loose from the wood, and I was working tallow into the joint to try and preserve it. She reached up, and her boot shifted on the uneven floor, and she lost her balance for just a half second. Not enough to fall, just enough that her hand came down onto my shoulder to catch herself. She froze. I set down the wheel. I turned. She was standing that close, her hands still on my shoulder, very still, like she was deciding whether to acknowledge it or pretend it hadn't happened. The lamp was behind her, and the light came around her in a narrow rim, and her face was in shadow. I could see a scar, small, old, long since healed, low on her neck, just above the collar of her dress. I didn't know how it got there. I didn't ask. But my hand came up without my full permission and stopped about an inch from it. She said, very quietly, "I'm too old for this." She said it the way a person states weather, like it had been true for years. I started to answer her. The roan hit the barn wall hard enough to shake the house. A solid, cracking impact, like a rifle shot in the dark. We both flinched back hard. She pulled her hand away. I was on my feet with my hand on my coat before I'd thought about it. "He does that," she said. Her voice was even, composed, too composed. "I'll check him," I said. I took my coat off the peg and went out the door. The roan was fine. He'd spooked at something, a coyote maybe, or just his own dark mood. He was standing in the back of the stall with his ears flat, already settling. I stood with him for a while, with my hand on his neck, listening to the wind come down off the ridge. The letter I'd sent north 3 weeks ago had nothing to do with finding another job come spring. I'd been doing quiet arithmetic since my second week on the property. Hector had died owing money to a supply merchant in Cimarron, not a ruinous sum, but enough to put a lien on the land if it went unpaid through winter. She didn't know about it. Or she knew and had decided not to know, which was worse. I'd written to a man I knew who brokered cattle sales in the territory, asked him to find a buyer for 10 head at fair market price. I had enough in a tobacco tin in my saddlebag to cover the difference. It was her land. It was going to stay her land. The mud underfoot turned to iron as December came in hard, and the morning I finished the last fence section, I stood at the north post and looked back at the property in the gray early light. It was a good piece of land. It would take everything a person had, every year, without fail. I settled the debt through the broker in town without going there myself, left the paperwork with the postmaster, and paid the fee out of the tobacco tin, and walked back to the property with 40 cents to my name, which was almost exactly what I'd arrived with. That evening, she asked me to come inside for coffee. She said it the way she said everything, straight and without decoration. I came in and sat down. I sat with my back to the room, facing the table. She brought the coffee and sat across from me, and we drank it without talking for a while. The stove was going, and the lamp was lit, and the wind was working at the shutters, but not getting in. At some point, she looked at me in a direct and steady way that she hadn't used before, not reading me for threat or work capacity, just looking. I looked back. We stayed like that for a moment. Then she picked up her cup. I picked up mine. I was gone by mid-December. Rode out on a Tuesday before she was up. That's always been my way. I left a cord of wood stacked under the lean-to that she hadn't asked for, and a note with the broker's name and address, in case she ever needed someone to deal straight with her on cattle. I didn't leave my name on the note. She knew my name by then. It didn't need to be written down. I have thought about that mirror, the sound of her boots slowing as she walked past it. The land takes its toll. It always does. But it took ours even. The law didn't thank us, and the dirt didn't either. If it was your land, if it was everything you had left in this world, would you have paid it?